Hi everyone and welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to be comparing some different seating options for plein air painting. I'm doing this in preparation for a retreat I'm leading next year, but thought it would be helpful just in general for folks. The first seating option is to not have any seat at all. This is obviously not the case for everyone, but if you can avoid having to carry a seat with you, the lightest and simplest way to paint at a tripod is to just stand there. The second option is some form of a small folding pad. Now, I included this even though I think it's largely impractical for painting, but I included it because it is, I guess, a viable option that one could use. As you can see, it's feather light, it's durable, it's packable, it's stupidly fast and easy, and there are plenty of off-brand alternatives to what I have here. But it does have some cons to it, namely that sitting on the ground is not the most comfortable thing in the world. It has limited padding, and obviously getting up and down is its own challenge. The next option is some form of backpacking chairs. Now, the one I'm showing here is really not something you can purchase anymore. I wasn't even able to find it online when I was prepping for this video. This one is kind of indicative of the category, though, in that it's compact, it's somewhat light, it's somewhat comfortable, and it's somewhat expensive. These things range from $80 to $300. They tend to lean back, so they're not great for painting, and I find them to be kind of slow and fiddly for setting up. That's fine if you're camping or backpacking or whatever and you have time to do that, but for painting, I kind of want to get to it and get going when I'm ready to leave. I also don't find it that comfortable. And when I was testing out these different chair options with my mom and my dad, who are in their 60s, as well as my wife and I testing them, some folks, especially my mom, reported that the poles were kind of uncomfortable sticking into her sides. They range different weight limits, different sizes. You can see here my wife sitting in the chair, just to give you an idea of different body sizes, different heights in the chair. So I'm just under 6 foot. She is about 5'4". Anyway, this particular chair folds up nice and compactly, and they vary in weight. This one's a little over 2 pounds. Our next option is a compact stool. This particular one is something that I found online. The brand I don't think necessarily matters. There are a bunch of different companies that produce this. This particular stool is very small, it's very light, it's surprisingly comfortable. It's much better than the tripod versions of these that I've seen all over the place. Those are less expensive than these, but not nearly as comfortable. With it having the 4 points, it's far more comfortable. It's surprisingly stable, and it's really fast to set up and break down. It does sit a little low, so that's definitely a con, but it can handle 275 pounds, and it is worth noting it has no padding, and for older folks, I think it could be a little bit challenging to get into and out of it. Both of my parents expressed some concern about that. But for a inexpensive, small, light, comfortable, stable option, it's a great choice. It sits just under 14 inches tall when it's open, but you can see when I break this thing down, it's really fast to set up and break down and extremely compact. The next option we have is a folding camp stool. Like with others, there's a lot of different versions of this. This is just one particular one that I found. In general, I find these things to be very light, surprisingly comfortable, extremely fast to set up, and they do sit a little bit higher than the compact stool that I just showed. You can easily fit this in your backpack, and I think this was probably my mother's favorite option of all of the kind of lightweight, small options. Its weight limit is something like 300 pounds compared to the portable stool where it was 275. Price is pretty similar, and it sits a little higher than the portable stool we just looked at. As you'll see with both me and her, our legs are a little bit bent, but not as much as with the portable stool, so it just sits a little bit higher. I think when it is fully set up and open, it's about 16 inches high. The compact kind of portable stool weighed about 1.3 pounds. This one weighs 1.4 pounds, so very comparable. I did find it a little bit fiddly to break down and put away, even after I had done it multiple times. It's not a huge deal, but it is worth noting. And the other thing is, it's a little bit bulky, especially if you compare it to the portable stool that I was just using. Here you can see me struggling to break it down. And again, this is not the first, second, third, fourth, or even fifth time that I have attempted this. Next up, we have the surprisingly popular circular collapsible chair. I see these things promoted a lot. I'm not entirely sure why. They might be one of those products that are better in theory than in practice. The idea is that they fold up small, they're very compact, they're fairly lightweight, and they're kind of a seat in a pinch. I would say for painting plein air, they're not a great option from my perspective. While yes, they're fast to set up, and yes, they can kind of hang by their own strap, and yes, they are a fairly simple premise, in practice, they're just uncomfortable, a little bit fiddly to open up and to break down, and they can carry a variety of different weights. This particular one is rated to 400 pounds, but you can see in this close-up that it only has single versions of these little nubs that it sits on. And my mom, for example, had some issue with being able to correctly open the stool and get those little nubs to seat correctly in the stool. And so she ended up sitting on it at one point, and the stool sat down like one row lower than she expected, and it kind of freaked her out. She didn't want to sit in it after that. I also took a look at a padded version. This is almost identical to the collapsible chair that I just showed you, except that it has a built-in pad on the top. They're both about 18 inches tall. They both weigh about 2.5 pounds. This one is rated to hold up to 620 pounds versus the other one, which is 400 pounds. They're about a $10 difference in price, maybe less. It is more comfortable with the pad, for sure. And the other thing that this one offers is that it has kind of 3 nubs. You'll see in a close-up that I show, it has 3 nubs that lock in at each level, which does feel like it's a little bit sturdier and better put together than the prior one. But it has all of the same issues as the prior one, other than being just a touch more comfortable. If I were going to keep one, I would keep the padded one. It's well worth the $7 to $10 difference to get that pad on there from a comfort standpoint, but neither one of these would be things that I would suggest for any kind of long-term sitting. The best advantage that they have is they sit tall, and so they're easy to sit down and get up from. Beyond that, they're fairly bulky even when folded up, and they're not very light. Now, the next chair was probably the biggest disappointment that I had of all of the different chairs and stools that I tried. And the reason that it was the biggest disappointment was I had a lot of hope for it. The idea is that it's a backpack, and built into the backpack is a stool with a backrest, which should make it more comfortable and more versatile, and perhaps solve another issue, which is having to have a separate bag. Unfortunately, that promise was unrealized. The first issue started before I even used it as a stool, and that was that due to the poor quality of the manufacturing process, one of the strap buckles was sewn on backwards, and so it has no teeth to bite down, and one of the shoulder straps just wouldn't hold. It would release and loosen up without any weight applied at all. So it's basically unusable from that standpoint. Unfortunately, I'd love to tell you that it gets better from there, but it doesn't. While yes, it has a backrest, and yes, it does sit fairly high at about 17 inches, aside from the poor quality with the backwards buckle and the shoulder strap not holding, it felt cheap, it's really bulky, it's actually not very comfortable. The angle of the front bar, if your legs are at all together, they have to kind of sit up on top of that bar, and it's really uncomfortable. Both my mom and my wife, who are shorter than me, found it extremely uncomfortable. I didn't notice it because I sort of spread my legs. Probably would suggest ruling it out. There are a bunch of them like this. I did not try all of them. There are versions of it that don't have a back. They're much more similar to that stool that I showed earlier, the red stool. If the backpack was the biggest disappointment, this is probably tied for my second biggest disappointment, and that is a garden kneeler. So a garden kneeler if you're not familiar with it, and I wasn't before I started looking into different options for this, a garden kneeler is there for folks who do gardening. So you can see me opening it up, and you could put it down like that and just kneel down on it while you're down by the ground, or you can flip it over and sit on it more like a small bench. Garden kneelers are wide, they're stable, they're certainly multifunctional, and most of them come with a pouch that you can attach to the side, similar to what you're seeing here. They tend to sit high. They have handholds on either side of them that can be helpful for getting up or sitting down. You could theoretically attach an umbrella to one of these. In fact, this particular model comes with an umbrella and an arm attachment. And you can see from me sitting there that, the height and the angle of it is actually really nice from a painting standpoint. Unfortunately, it's extremely heavy. It can hold up to 330 pounds, but you're getting that at a cost. It is 8.8 pounds, so it's almost 9 pounds. It's extremely bulky, and to be frank, it's not very comfortable. While it is wide and it does have those handholds, which is nice, and it certainly is easy to break down, it's extremely bulky. It's very, very uncomfortable to walk around with. You certainly couldn't put it in the back of a backpack, a standard backpack. The next option is a folding tripod stool. Now, there are a lot of these out there, and they vary pretty wildly from what I noticed in terms of quality. I looked at several from a number of different brands before I got to this one. Now, this one's from Dick's Sporting Goods, DSG, and it's called a tripod stool with back. In general, this thing is fairly comfortable. The backrest sits upright, so it's nice for painting. It's fairly compact, and it's definitely fast and easy to set up and break down. At $25, it's also extremely inexpensive for what it offers, I think. It can hold up to 250 pounds, and it only weighs 4.1 pounds itself, which is lighter than a lot of the other options that are out there. The biggest downside to it is that on its own, it is not the most comfortable seat of all of the options. But Dick's also sells what they call a bleacher cushion, and it's this red foam pad that you can see here in the video. And if you add that to the stool, and it's only a $10 add-on, it weighs half a pound. So you're talking about 4.5 pounds for both of them. It's actually remarkably comfortable. It's comfortable on your butt. It's comfortable on your back because you do have some back support there. The only real hang-up that I have, and the only reason it's not the only seat that I would recommend for people for plein air, especially if they have to travel, is that it's a little bit tall. And so if you were traveling and needing it for flights, you would have to probably check a bag. It's not going to fit in a backpack, and it's not going to fit in a carry-on bag. It does have a shoulder strap, and to be honest, once you add that bleacher cushion, it really shines for comfort and kind of practical use. So it's a great option. The next option that we have is what I'm calling cane chairs. So they are some form of a stool or chair that is built into functionally a cane. This particular one is from Tada. It's the Tada Series 2 chair. It weighs 2.2 pounds and can hold up to 300 pounds. And this is probably tied for the second biggest disappointment for me. Not because it didn't work. It worked fine. It's just it wasn't very popular among all the people that I had try it out. The built-in cane is nice, certainly, for walking. And from my perspective, it removes some of the weight that you're carrying because it's in your hand, not on your shoulders or on your back. It's really fast and easy to set up. And you can see for both me and my wife, you sit quite high, so it's easy to sit and stand from it. That said, it's built into a cane, and this seemed to really bother my wife and my parents far more than it bothered me that they'd have to walk around with a cane. My mother also didn't like that you had to kind of straddle the handle, and that was the only way to sit in it. The seat itself isn't super comfortable, and probably the biggest issue that you're going to have with it is that it's quite expensive. At the time that I'm making this video, it's around $120. It would also probably require checking a bag if you were taking this on a flight. The last option is a portable backyard camp chair. These vary wildly in terms of price, in terms of feature set, in terms of how much weight they can carry. Things that are very consistent across all of them is that they tend to be more comfortable than any of the other options that I've shown. They're familiar for folks. They have an armrest. They have a backrest. Here's the problem. They're huge. They're bulky, they don't sit upright, and from a painting standpoint, that can be a real problem at a tripod. You can see me actually kind of wrestling with this thing and moving myself forward and back, trying to get comfortable to a point where I could paint from it. The other thing is, if you're going to travel with this at all, from a plein air standpoint, it's really kind of difficult to pack and travel with. I hesitated a little bit to include it, but it is a fairly common thing. And I think a lot of people would look at this and say, well, I'll just use this thing. But certainly if you're doing any kind of travel, I would not suggest this. And that's it. That's 12 different options that I've provided. I've got here some shots so you can kind of compare them. And they're not in a specific order here, but I am trying to compare some common different examples so that you can see what the difference is between what is the relative height of the different stools that I looked at compared to just a pad that sits on the ground. And the final note that I would add is, if you wanted my suggestion for the best all-around option, it's probably the tripod stool with the backrest and the bleacher cushion for comfort, portability, and just overall, it seemed to be the most popular among all the folks that I had tested. That's all I've got for you. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'd love to hear your comments or thoughts if you had others.